is a primarily agrarian economy. There are over 700 million people here who make their livelihoods from farming. Take a train in India and look out the window. Once you get out of the cities, chances are you'll see something like this. Fields, the result of years of effort and generations of families. Industrial farming isn't the norm here, as it is in many industrialized countries. Most farmers own plots of land between 1 to 2 acres in size and consume most of what they grow. Recently, farmers have begun to buy more and more seed on a regular basis, making a distinct departure from the older practice of saving seed. Advances in new seed technologies and aggressive marketing strategies are two reasons, but one of the major catalysts of this change has been significant demand from farmers. Not all these small farmers are so-called subsistence farmers. Farmers do sell their produce on the market, vegetables in particular. Farmers not only sell their produce here, but also buy seed. There are a number of ways that farmers acquire seed. The market offers private sector varieties, both those developed and packaged domestically, as well as imported varieties. The government undertakes its own breeding programs and provides it. And of course, farmers themselves save in exchange with each other. However, this acquisition is changing due to the obligations that India, like many other countries, have to fulfill in light of the commitments they have made within the World Trade Organization. In the WTO is an agreement called TRIPS, or the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. TRIPS has gotten a lot of attention recently because of the implications that it has on the ownership of plant genetic resources. This includes seed. The problem is that the ownership of seed is quickly changing hands. Because of advances in biotechnology and the changing landscape of IPR law, seed is up for grabs. As it is now, there really isn't much of a question as to who owns seed. Farmers have been growing the same seed for 400 years or more, and they got it from their forefathers, who got it from their forefathers, and so on. But no one really owns the seed. It's there, farmers use them, and no one has really told them otherwise. But TRIPS creates new ownership conflicts. If farmers' access to seed is limited, their food security is threatened. Of the almost 30 million people who live in the state of Jharkhand, almost a third are tribal, or Adivasi. The significant minority was the catalyst for the formation of Jharkhand as an independent state in November 2000. Among the Adivasi community, most are farmers. That is, they earn their livelihoods from farming. Most of the rural population in Jharkhand farms. This is regardless of the fact that it's a drought-prone area, with much of the land unsuitable for farming due to high elevation. Yet still, 80% of the population lives in these areas and engages in farming as their main source of livelihood. Most farmers, but not all, own and farm on plots of land that average around 2 acres in size. Farmers may own more land on paper, but much of this land may not be suitable for agriculture. By far and away, the most prevalent crop grown is paddy, or rice. Given that it is a drought-prone area and irrigation is difficult as the water table is so far down the earth, rice can only be grown during the rainy, or rabi season, which roughly corresponds with our summer and fall. Wheat and maize are grown as well, but not as much as rice, as these are winter or kharif crops. There is not enough rain in the winter to grow these crops. Vegetables are grown as well, but rice is the lifeblood of farmers here. It isn't only eaten and sold for income, but it also plays a central role in festivities, marriages, and ceremonies. When considering the role of rice within these communities, one cannot merely consider its role within food alone. It's indeed impossible to separate rice from society.
अपने घर के भी लाते हैं, अगर ऐसा नहीं है सरकार से भी खाते हैं। अच्छा, और बाजार से भी लाते हैं। बाजार से भी ज़्यादा कहाँ तो अधिकतर घर का ही भी होता है।
बाजार से भी लाते हैं, क्रॉस भी देती है हम लोग।
हॉली क्रॉस
या फिर आप लोग
बीज बचा कर रखते हैं,
फिर अपना
या फिर कहीं दूसरे से मांगते हैं, ऐसा भी है।
Most farmers buy vegetable seed every year, but rice is a different story. Depending on how well off the farmer is, rice is usually saved for at least 3 years. If it's a local variety, it's saved repeatedly. Local varieties typically don't yield that much rice, so many farmers have stopped growing these varieties, often happily.
नया वैरायटी लगाने का मकसद होता है कि जिससे पुराना वैरायटी से हम लोग को बेनिफिट कम हो रहा है। नया वैरायटी लगाता है किसान तो उसको बेनिफिट ज़्यादा होता है, जिसके चलते आजकल जो जितने भी है वो आज ज़्यादा ध्यान देता है लोग कि नया वैरायटी ही लगाना।
Over the last 10 or so years, a lot of farmers have started to grow high-yielding and hybrid varieties of rice. They cost more, but they yield more too, so the extra expense is often worth it for farmers. Farmers still save traditional varieties, but how much depends on the type of farmer. Generally speaking, those farmers interviewed here who save seed on a regular basis either do so because it saves them money, because they're less prone to pest attacks, or because they have sufficient land on which to sacrifice the cultivation of newer, higher-yielding varieties.
आप अधिकतर पुराना धान लगाते हैं, नया धान लगाते हैं?
पुराना धान लगाते हैं।
कितने % लगाते हैं? कितनी प्रतिशत भूमि में आप पुराना लगाते हैं, कितनी प्रतिशत न्यू लगाते हैं?
वो 70% 70% पुराना धान और 30% नया धान। उसमें पुराना धान लगाने का वजह ये है कि नया धान में बहुत ज़्यादा मैंने खाद लगाना पड़ता है और उसके लिए भरपूर सिंचाई की ज़रूरत होती है।
जी हाँ, और दवाई भी डालना पड़ता है।
दवाई भी देना पड़ता है और खेत को नया धान जो है वो खेत को बर्बाद भी करता है।
For the majority of small farmers, buying seed on a regular basis isn't cheap, and neither are the pesticides and fertilizers that accompany these seeds. Those farmers who save seed are more often than not doing so because they cannot afford to buy seed regularly. This is particularly true in remote communities where access to seed markets is difficult. The private sector seed industry in India is still in its very early stages. Many of these seed companies are simply repackaging local varieties and reselling them under their brand name. There are no legal barriers to this, no issues of ownership at hand. The farmers who supply these varieties sell them to resellers at a fixed rate, and the resellers then sell them for a profit. Shouldn't the providers of the original varieties get some kind of compensation for their knowledge? After all, over 400 years, these varieties were crossed, selected, and bred by farmers to be the best of the best. Shouldn't that long history be acknowledged? Well, many people think so, but to acknowledge ownership of these varieties, some type of mechanism must be in place to assert ownership. TRIPS mandates its member states to offer some sort of protection over seeds, either by a patent or another form of intellectual property right, with the only caveat being that the latter must be effective. This protection could potentially be conferred to a wide variety of parties: the government, the private sector, and perhaps most importantly, to individual farmers or farming communities themselves. Someone has to own these seeds. India has been part of the WTO from the beginning, and as part of the deal, it has to make sure that lines of ownership are clearly marked. But drawing these lines of ownership isn't easy. Attitudes and opinions surrounding ownership often oppose each other. One option would be a piece of legislation that includes farmers' rights. Another option would be to provide recognition to formal breeders and provide breeders' rights. Ideally, any legislation aimed at protecting both the interests of breeders as well as farmers would include both. Both parties are crucial to food security, and both are worthy of protection. This is exactly what India's current legislation has done. Yet, at the same time, India has applied to join UPOV, which has no mention of farmers' rights. This makes little sense, as the current legislation, the PPV, already exists and provides protection to both parties. Many feel that this is a step in the very wrong direction, and for all the wrong reasons.
UPOV is a structure and platform that was put up by the private sector when the private sector became very involved with seed production. So it essentially looks after the interests of the seed producer as seen in the Western context of the industry. The seed industry is the seed producer and the major seed supplier. There is no notion of farmers' rights in UPOV, and therefore there can be no question of UPOV's applicability or that kind of system being beneficial under developing country agriculture conditions, where farmers' rights have to be foremost.
At this point, it's not clear which of the two choices India has will take primacy. Gene Campaign has filed a public interest litigation against the Indian government for applying to UPOV, since the PPV has already been passed as law. It's currently in the courts, and the outcome remains to be seen. The WTO has changed much in India. The consequences of these changes to farmers are just beginning to be felt. Farmers are already saving less and less seed due to the advent of new technologies, and are usually more than happy to adopt new varieties. But ultimately, what really matters to them is food security. If this can be met by new technologies, so be it. But no one should forget where these seeds originally came from.